Greetings, acolytes, students, and welcome back to another lecture. I see your desire to expand your dark side archives has increased. Very well. And I can see and peer into your mind. Through your motions and body movements, I can correctly infer that your power and your desire to live eternally has grown. Very well then, my acolytes. Today we are going to be exploring into some of the most powerful Sith to ever live. The one Sith that could prolong death. The primary goal of every single Sith Lord in their egotistical quest for immortality is primarily the goal of living forever, with each Dark Lord attempting to cement themselves as the one sole Dark Lord, living as an eternal dictator over the Star Wars galaxy, oppressing their tyrannical regime and making the dark side the primary force in the galaxy. Various Sith have attempted to live forever, although to date, none have actually achieved it, although some have certainly gotten close. So today, we are going to be exploring a multitude of Sith, 8 in total, 8 Sith Lords who returned from the dead, and how they ultimately were able to impart their imprint across the galaxy's history. Before we proceed, a lot of the ships that dock in our hangar bays and enlist themselves with our academies are yet to be subscribed. If you're enjoying the daily updates into our archives that we provide, then I implore you, force crush that subscribe button. Anyway, my friends, let us proceed. Starting off, we have to mention Emperor Palpatine. Palpatine was one of, if not the most powerful Sith Lord to have ever existed. He took the galaxy by storm, impacting the galaxy, perhaps more than any other single individual. Palpatine, both in canon and legends, returns to life, more powerful than ever. After his death at Endor in canon, Palpatine transferred his essence into the clone body known as Snoke, who is a character that we love to cover here on the channel. After Snoke's vessel proved insufficient and his flesh began to decay and deteriorate after many hours, Palpatine inhabited a clone replica of himself. This clone replica was the phantom and decaying zombie Palpatine that we saw in the opening scenes of The Rise of Skywalker. Of course, the diet in the Force that he fed on, using his immense Force power from Rey and Kylo Ren, ultimately caused his immense power and caused his covering the secret of immortality to increase. Palpatine nearly became a full dark side god on par with a being like Vitiate. In Legends, Palpatine also returned to life multiple times, using clone bodies he had stored on the ancient planet Biss, which he had previously drained of all life energy, killing trillions, if not more. Palpatine was capable of using this and the essence transfer technique in order to inhabit younger clone bodies, in which he was capable of healing himself, using the Force to utterly shame and humiliate Luke Skywalker himself in a lightsaber duel. Following Palpatine, we have his ancient analog, Darth Vitiate, Valkorion, Tenebrae, a Sith that we like to cover thoroughly on the channel. Emperor Vitiate, or Valkorion, was one of the most powerful Sith, if not the most powerful Sith Lord to ever exist, and one of the most powerful Force wielders. Ever since he was a young boy, Vitiate desired to live forever. After the fall of Marka Ragnos, Vitiate distanced himself from the Sith, not desiring to engage in the futile and tedious power struggle posed by Naga Sadow and Ludo Kresh. Vitiate knew he was far beyond them, and remained content, ruling Nathema, his own world, for a century. Vitiate then performed ancient dark-side techniques, a ritual of immense power known as the Nathema Ritual, which ripped the entire life force from the entirety of Nathema, including 8,000 of his fellow Sith, who he had previously bound his will, leaving one sole figure alive, the Emperor. Through this, Vitiate gained immortality. His spirit became immortal. While his physical body would decay, Vitiate's spirit would never decompose. After this, and after Vitiate was defeated by the hero of Tython, he fed on Zyos, an ancient Sith world, dominating continents of entire people using his mind-dominating abilities, absolutely decimating them, and creating a wave of dark side energy that siphoned all of the energy and Force power from the planet directly into Darth Vitiate, further rejuvenating himself and making himself even more immortal. In the end, Vitiate was only killed when his spirit was confronted, and his spiritual imprint was defeated, with all of his clone bodies dead. Vitiate's ultimate goal of immortality was finally thwarted. Following this, we have Vitiate's own master. We have Marka Ragnos. Marka Ragnos was an ancient Dark Lord of the Sith and a half-Sith, half-human hybrid, and who was native to the planet of Korriban, a descendant of the original Dark Jedi exiles who had arrived almost 2 millennia prior to Ragnos' birth. Ragnos lived for well over a century, and after his physical demise, during his funeral and the power of succession between Naga Sadao and Ludo Kresh, Ragnos appeared as a ghostly ethereal apparition at his own funeral, informing them that they had to pick the select candidate, and only the strongest would be able to succeed him. Ragnos continued to impart his knowledge and power in the countless generations of Sith to come, imparting it onto Exar Kun and Ulic Qel-Droma, christening them both as Dark Lords of the Sith, and later, even influencing the Dark Jedi Tavian Axis during the time of Luke Skywalker's Jedi Order, and still today, after 5 millennia, Michael Ragnos continues to dwell in the Star Wars galaxy. Following this, we have Darth Endedu, one of the most famous users and famous practitioners of living forever. Darth Endedu was the pioneer of the essence transfer technique, which was stated to be his most famous feat. Darth Endedu created the essence transfer technique, which beings such as Palpatine and Vitiate, who we mentioned previously, would all use in an attempt to sustain their life. Through this, Endedu was able to live for centuries as a god king of Prakoth, constantly changing vessels to never outlive his physical prime. Eventually, his paranoia consumed him and he became a spirit, living for over 6 millennia. Darth Endedu inhabited as a spirit until 137 ABY, where Darth Krayt and Darth Warlock, who were increasingly worried about Krayt's health issue due to the Yuzong Vong parasites being well over 170 years old, travelled to Prakoth in the deep core, relying on the unstable hyperspace routes that has long since gone obsolete. Endedu was confronted by Rylock and in a battle of wills was ultimately defeated. Following this, we have to give an honourable mention to Darth Plagueis. While Darth Plagueis never returned to death, he was right on the cusp of discovering the secret on how to prolong his life indefinitely. Using his midichlorian studies, Darth Plagueis would be capable of using the Force to prolong his death indefinitely, and was able to stop age entirely, even reverse it, making him look while he was well over a century old, as he had many decades prior when he originally had made Darth Sidious his own apprentice. After Plagueis, and now 5th installment on this list, we have Exar Kun. Exar Kun was one of the most powerful Sith of all time, and was widely regarded as the most powerful Sith of his time, besides, of course, Vitiate. Exar Kun was capable of chaining himself and feeding on thousands of Masasai death, the warrior caste of the Sith pure-blooded empire. In order to live forever, Exar Kun became a spirit, and was only stopped after he attempted to rip the spirit of Luke Skywalker when he was the Grand Master of the Jedi Order in 11 ABY from his body, ultimately failing and perishing, being banished back into the disemboweled netherworld of the Force itself. After this, and the 6th installment, we have Revan, a character who needs very little introduction. Revan was easily capable of using the Force in order to prolong his life. Revan specifically is a very interesting one, as Revan was capable of using the Force in such an absurd way. He was able to resurrect himself, something we have never seen in all of Star Wars lore. Revan was able to animate his corpse in battle after his death, with his dark side spirit embodying his actual light side self, with his dark side spirit controlling his body. Revan was able to reanimate his corpse in battle through sheer willpower, and took the galaxy's greatest heroes such as the Outlander, and many others, Darth Maul included, to continue to defeat him. Moving on, we actually have Darth Maul. Darth Maul was an exceptionally powerful Dark Counselor, who was stated as being better at defending a planet than a planetary defense shield. Darth Maul was so formidable, he was capable of besting even the greatest Dark Counselors in combat. Darth Maul was able to live on afterwards as a Force ghost, using the Force in unorthodox ways in order to prolong his life, very similar to Ragnos. And still, Darth Maul still exists, acting as a force of good in the Star Wars galaxy, though currently in hiding. In the end, Darth Maul was one of the nicest and most serene of all Sith Lords. Finally, as the last being on our list, at number 8, we have the legend himself. Prepare, drumroll please my acolytes, as we immerse ourselves in this final Sith. We have Carnus Mur. Carnus Mur was one of the original founding members of the Order of the Sith Lords. Carnus Mur was capable of using his Mur talisman, which was crafted by fellow alchemist and darksider Sorza Sin. Sorza Sin was capable of using the Force in unorthodox alchemical ways, organizing biological alchemical creations and creating 3 great amulets. This amulet allowed Mer to contain his spirit within it, allowing him to live forever. Mer lived for over 7 millennia, living in his physical body for over a century and a half. Mer was capable of living for 7 millennia, until finally his Mer talisman was discovered in 137 ABY, where it was fully destroyed by Cade Skywalker, pouring energy into its shatter point. Mer previously was able to ragdoll Darth Krayt, who was at the time the most powerful Sith of his time and one of the most powerful in galactic history. Well, my friends, what did you think of these 7 unorthodox ways that the Sith began to prolong death? I truly love how unique the Sith are. Their egotistical quest for immortality ultimately ended in failing, and they almost never, ever achieved their goals. But in the end, they kept pursuing it. The closest you can argue that anyone got to immortality was Marka Ragnos, while physical immortality was obviously Tenebrae. Tenebrae and Ragnos were 2 Sith who continue to live on today, not hindered by various substances, artifacts. Marka Ragnos still dwells in the Star Wars galaxy, imprinting and imposing his tyrannical regime, scheming in the shadows until the ultimate death of the galaxy. Well, my friends, I'll see you in the galaxy far, far away. Remember to pay your respects to the old masters, as from the tombs we now head.